When I think of babies, I think of just how selfish we can all be. Uh, no, honestly, but in jest. And I want to just, for all of you who got to celebrate up on stage, for all of you seniors and parents and babies and parents, it's just such an incredible moment for you and for us. And I wanted to use that, to kind of harness that emotion to tap into something that's very real to all of us, and that is selfishness. And selfishness gets a bad rap. You know, it's like we shouldn't be selfish, except we are, right? Like we are just selfish through and through and through. And some of that can't be avoided. Some of that it's just natural, it's who we are, and I'm not trying to put it out there as a negative thing. All right, so like I ripped this from a website this morning. I think it's from like AP. Like here's like their top headlines. This is what's going on in the world. These are the most important things. And you could probably, if you can see what these even say from wherever you're sitting, you could probably look at these and say, I know other things that are happening in the world that are even more important than those things. Because we know about what's going on in the world, and we know about how important those things are. They're big, they're massive. But if your baby is graduating from high school this year, like as important as what's going on in Israel, Palestine is in the world, there's an aspect of in which that is more important to you, right? Maybe you had a kid get married. Maybe you're pregnant right now. And you're feeling your child in your womb for the first time like kick and move around. What's more important to you? Who advanced in the NBA playoffs? Or what's going on inside of your body? So there's an innate selfishness that's not necessarily evil. It is just how we operate, and we need to be aware of it if we want to be effective. So we've got these milestone celebrations, these things in our lives, and it's not just being born or the first year or two of life. It's not just graduating high school. There's so many, right? And so many early on that we celebrate. It's the kid's first haircut, the first tooth that broke through, which doesn't really get celebrated that much by the parents because it's usually accompanied by lots of tears and sleepless nights. But it's a tooth. And then that goes on to, first day of school, like all of these things, all these firsts that happen. And as parents, we can really, really cherish those things because they're so important to us. And when we're close to those people, they're really important to us too. And the farther away you get, the less important they are. So if some stranger walked up to you and was very excited and said, guess what, my baby said its first word, you might not really care that much. In fact, if you met a baby that you knew had started to talk, one thing that people often do is they get down in front of that baby. And what do? I want you to now say my name because I'm important somehow in your life. It's just, like, oh, you're trying to say mama? Don't worry about that. Say Rob. Can you say Rob? Can you say that? And so it's just a little bit how we work. I've got as a graph, I have a child. I have 4, but one of them is about to graduate from preschool. Her name's Tori. And so this represents Tori's graduation, little dot. This is not to scale, by the way. War in Ukraine. So obviously one is much more important, bigger impact in the world, and one has importance to me, right? And so if we kind of see, so this would be my graph. Until I don't know, is it next week? Okay, until after, it's really important to me. Until after next week, and then it's behind us, and then preschool graduation becomes a little less important. Now, there's other ways, so time is a factor. There's other things that matter too. Because what if one of the guys that I went to high school with or college with or one of their kids or somebody, all of a sudden I find out that they are getting deployed and they have to go be stationed someplace that's being affected by this war. Now all of a sudden I know something. What if it's my kid? What if it's me? All of a sudden it gets more serious. I think that happened a lot with COVID, right? COVID, and people are like, okay, people are getting sick. I get that people are getting sick. And it was easy, not for everybody. Some people right from the beginning were very in tune and very concerned about COVID-19. Many were not. What is going on? We don't really understand it. And then somebody close to you got it. And maybe they got really sick. Maybe they died. All of a sudden, COVID got a lot more important in your life. How you were going to respond to it. What were you going to do? How you were going to react to other people who maybe were more sensitive or less sensitive than you were. So these things, we tend to measure them by what it is that is going on in our world. How big is the thing? The bigger it is, it's going to ripple into your life, right? We all know that. We all know that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce started dating last year because it was the biggest thing. I'm a 42-year-old man. I can name 2 Taylor Swift songs, but now I know a whole lot about her because it was so important that the world pushed it on me, right? So there's things that are just so big, so massive, that we just can't avoid them. They become a part of our lives. But then also these ideas. How close is it? How close is it in time? How close is it to your life? And how much control or influence may I have over it? So we could say, starting to get closer to home, maybe we identify an issue that is an issue in this area. So here's a local problem. But maybe it's maybe there's a local issue with homelessness. We have a lot of homeless people that live around here. And so that might be very close to home, but I might think, but what can I do about that? Right? So if it seems to be too big, then I might separate myself in those ways. So there's a lot of different ways to think about it. I don't want to get too hung up on this, but it's important just to understand how we process things. And that not at all was to take away from what we just did. That was my weird way of celebrating with you all, but just, and to kind of move into some of these things because we will never be shy of issues. There's always going to be things that are going to be happening. And so it's a very real thing. How do I, as an individual, how should I approach those things? How should I address those things? And as a church, what should we do as a church? How should we address those things? How should a church handle it? Because there'll always be things. So do we get up here week after week? Say, well, here's what happened in the news this week. Here's how you should think about it. Here's what you should do about it. Here's what happened in the news this week. Here's what you should think about it. Here's what you should do about it. Here's what happened in the news this week. Here's what you should think about it. Here's what you should do about it. That would get a little old, and you get really dependent on the couple of people that were trying to figure out what you should think and what you should do. Instead, we want to take a different approach. And that is here, that's something about here is, this is kind of a philosophy of ministry that I want to share with you. And kind of when you think about having raised your kids, you talk about the issues, you talk about the things that are going on, the things that are happening in the world, and you process those things together. And hopefully through those moments, you're teaching your children how to think about things, how to do things, how to handle things, how to walk through life. So when they graduate out of your house and they're becoming adults and they're living on their own, and when they're faced with certain problems, they will be able to handle those issues and not have to call you every single time. A couple of phone calls will be nice, guys. Call mom. Ask some silly question. It'll make her feel really good that you still need mom. But there's also something that is so great in parenthood when they don't need you. It's tough, but great because you taught them how to do it. And that's what church is. That's what our educational program is when we teach and we preach. Here, we're trying to not just say, here's an issue, here's how to deal with this issue, how to think about this issue, or how the church should process this. We should have those conversations, but deep down, we want to be disciples. We want to be becoming more and more, when we say discipleship or disciple making, what we're talking about is learning from Jesus how to become more like Jesus. Right? So that is what a disciple is. A disciple is someone who is trying to learn from Jesus to become more like Jesus. And if we're saying that we want to make a disciple, then we're trying to help that person learn from Jesus to become more like Jesus. Because we believe whatever the current event is, if you have learned to be like Jesus and to think like Jesus and act like Jesus, then when that thing comes into your world, you'll be able to respond like Jesus would respond. If you're following Jesus and Jesus is changing the core of who you are, then that will happen. So I alluded to this earlier. There's no shortage of causes. When we go back just the last 2 or 3 years, we could start laundry listing the amount of things that have been pushed on the church. Care about this, talk about this, do something about this. And a lot of churches said, oh, okay, what is it? Okay, we'll do that. Okay, let's get together. We got to do something about this issue, this cause, because it's really important to the world. We want to show the world that we're active, that we care about people, that we love people, and that we're doing something about it. So the church organizes and they start doing something about it. And as soon as they get to start doing something about it, the world says, oh, we don't really care about that anymore. But good job, if we even recognize what the church did to mobilize. Here's what we care about now. This is the really important thing in the news cycle. What's the church doing about this? And as a church, some churches find a cause, they latch onto that cause, and it's a beautiful thing. They really are able to affect some sector of society and what they do together, how they serve the world. What I'm saying is I think that if we focus on being disciples of Jesus Christ, we'll change the world in a different way. Because there are the bigger needs, maybe food insecurity or homelessness or things like that we can mobilize and we can do something about. But there also are the neighbors that live next door to us and down the street from us, and the people we work with and the people we go to school with. And when they come into your life and they're having a bad day, they don't really care as much about some of the big issues in the world. They care about the fact that they're having a bad day. And they want to know if you care about them. They want to know if you will listen to them, if you'll give them a hug, if you'll lend them an ear, if you'll take them out to lunch, if you'll help them out with something, help them process something. So learning to be like Jesus is an important thing. Now that kind of moves into some conversations that we started to have to say, well, what are the strengths of Grace Chapel? What are the strengths of our community? What are we really good at? And what are the needs of our community? When we look at our community, what are the things that our community really need? And in talking to 60 to 80 of the leaders of this church, the top 2 things that we said, when we look out at the community, what do people need? Jesus and community. That we see that we live in a community that doesn't have a whole lot. There are some, but not a whole lot of physical needs. There's not a lot of absence of material things. But there seems to be an absence of connection. Seems to be like people really need friends. And this lines up with surveys that are national surveys that have been happening for the last 10 years, is the rate of people expressing loneliness, the rate of people saying that they either have only one good friend or 0 good friends, it just goes up and up and up every year. And so we said, well, if we're a good community, if we can be friends, if we can love one another, if we can be outgoing and friendly and serve one another, that is really what our world needs. Can we do that? Can we marry those things? Can we take a Christ-centered, loving community and share that with the world around us? I believe that is what we hope to be at Grace Chapel. That is what we are hoping to be more of every day. And that is one of the reasons why this whole year our theme is like Jesus, because we want to be like Jesus. And one of the things that Jesus did really well was create community. And so for the last 4 weeks, we looked at 4 different ways that Jesus did that. First, Jesus just coming into the world. That Jesus came and he tabernacled among us. All through the Gospel of John, we see all of these different relationships that Jesus had. So Jesus came from heaven. He became a man, became human, to be like us and to be with us. And then we see him call the disciples, regular guys, and he says, hey, live with me, walk with me, go with me, be my companions, be my bros. And then in the next couple of chapters, in chapter 3, we see Jesus talk with a Pharisee named Nicodemus. He kind of wrestle with some of the questions that Nicodemus had and engage with him and give him the time, give him the space. And then we saw him talk to an unlikely talking companion in the Samaritan woman at the well. We learned from all of those things in the first bit of John as Jesus is just starting to really start his ministry and introduce himself to people and get to know people. We learned some lessons about how we can befriend like Jesus. Kind of those initial steps. As we go on through the Gospel of John, we'll see, especially the last 10 chapters, that Jesus interacts the most. It's really the last week of Jesus' life. And we see all of these interactions with the people that Jesus was closest to. And so for the month of May, what we're going to do is we're not going to look at as much like how to break into relationship or how to start relationship, but how do we take relationship deeper? And this is really important because what ended up happening last month when we started to talk about friendship and the importance of friendship, what we learned was that there was a lot of people that were here that felt like, you know what, Grace Chapel is an extremely friendly church, but I don't know if I really have many friends here. And that's tough. That's tough to hear. It's tough to recognize. Because if we're going to do it right, if we want to do it right and be this for the community, the first thing we need to do is be it. We need to live by example. We need to live by example. So when we interact with people and we meet people that they honestly say, honestly, I really don't have somebody I can trust. I really don't have many people that if something really goes wrong, I can call them up on the phone and I know that they'll be there for me. I know that they'll hear me out. I know that if I need them to drive 15, 20, 35 minutes and come and be with me, that they'll do that. People are saying, I don't have that. We can't look at them and say, I know, me neither. We want to be able to look at them and say, I do have that, and the reason I have that is because of Jesus Christ. The reason I have that is not because I'm a great, charismatic person and people just love me. They are always wanting to help me. It's because I've met a group of people that all have the same Lord, and that unites us. It makes us brothers and sisters. And so there's a care that runs deep in those relationships. And I would love to introduce you to that community, but being a part of that community really hinges on knowing that Lord. But we can't get to those conversations unless we actually have that community. And so we need to do that. So just kind of thinking through, like, how can we really be that for the community is that we need to be living it by example. And then we need to ourselves be able to actually connect with people that aren't already in the church, and then be open enough so that we're not just one giant clique. Like, hey, we're doing community great with one another, but then as soon as somebody walks in from the outside, we're like, who are you? Like, how'd you get in? Right? There needs to be an openness. I think those are all 3 really important things. All right, I appreciate the time. I usually get up here, I want to jump right into the Word. I want to dive right into Scriptures. I don't like it when some guy just gets up on stage and starts talking what seems like his own thoughts. And so I feel a little bit like a hypocrite, but I thought it was important to use that to kind of cast some vision. Because I think this isn't just this month's sermons. This is the direction of our church. This is what God is calling us to. That we're saying we're a friendly bunch, and we've got the capacity to have a really amazing community here. And some of us have already experienced quite a bit of that. And we think it's noteworthy enough that when we look into the world and we say, this is what the world is lacking, that this could actually be why God in 2024 has assembled us and brought all of us together is to be a force, not to end hunger necessarily, or end homelessness, or to end racism, but to start a friendship movement where we actually can say in a world of loneliness and individualism that we have good friends. And that can be a witness to the world. And so Jesus, our great example, we'll look at John chapter 13. Jesus shows us how to do it. We're going to look at this text, and I'm just going to break down every couple of verses to extract a point that I think is really pertinent to, all right, so here's a bunch of people, look around, here's a bunch of friendly people. How do we go deeper? How does this person become more than that? How do we become deeper friends? And so John chapter 13. I'm just going to read. Oh, you don't say. All right, it was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up for the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. I'm so fascinated by how this starts, because there's statement after statement as this, before Jesus washes his disciples' feet, where the author of this gospel wants us to know that Jesus knew the time had come. Jesus knew he was about to die. Jesus knew what was going on, and Jesus knew who he was. He knew the situation. He knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. Why is that so important? It's important because in all of Jesus really knowing, and I would say being secure in who he was able to, as the master, as the rabbi who would have been over those guys, those men that he was in the room with, it was only in the security of knowing who he was that he was able to get up, wrap the towel around his waist, and start washing their feet. And so I would argue that for us, too, in order to be better friends to one another and better friends to the world, people in the world, that it comes first with a security of knowing who we are and whose we are and where we are now and where we're going. And in the knowledge of that, being filled up with, I don't need that person's approval, because fear and insecurity drive us so significantly. Why won't I reach out to you? Well, you probably don't want to talk to me. You probably don't have time for me. Some of that we can frame in the like, oh, I'm doing this for your sake. You know, like you seem really busy. I don't want to bother you. But that's just an excuse that my mind is making because I think I'm a bother. That's insecurity. Jesus came into the world. Jesus was the light coming into the world. And Jesus, the light coming into the world, looked at his followers and said, you are the light of the world. And if we are then Jesus' followers and disciples and trying to become more like Jesus, then we have to know we're God's. We're God's children. And we are the light of the world. And so it's not about, I don't want to bother that person. It's about, do you know whose you are? Moving on in the text. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. So, Peter feels like he's doing something that's honorable and denying Jesus the ability to wash his feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon Peter, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said that not everyone was clean. So we see Jesus served his friends, but also Jesus took initiative. I think these things are so important, that Jesus felt secure, he knew who he was, and Jesus took initiative. Another problem that we have in breaking the surface and becoming better friends is that we're waiting for somebody else to do it. If I got up here and said, I've been at Grace Chapel for a little over 2.5 years, and I don't really have many good friends, or I don't have any good friends, there'd be a half a dozen of you that might be offended. You're like, I thought I was your good friend. And a whole bunch that might say, me too. Now, if I say it in my selfish self, I want people to feel sorry for me. I want people to say, oh, I guess I should reach out to Rob. But if you say it because I'm not, I won't say mean things about myself. If you say it, I would turn a question to you. And I'd say, well, what are you doing? Who are you calling? Who are you connecting with? Like, you could say, I don't have any good friends here, but what are you doing to make good friends? Is there anybody here that would say, oh, but Rob's a good friend to me? And so initiative is so important. Jesus didn't sit around and say, I hope one of the disciples asks me to wash their feet. Or I hope one of the disciples picks up the basin and towel and gets it and they wash all of our feet. Jesus knew what he had to do. He knew who he was, and he took initiative. Jesus served his friends. And I'll just finish this out and then make the last point. And when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place, said, do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. So this I think is so important, is friends serve one another. But Jesus, in example in his conversation with Peter, let us know another thing. Friends serve one another, and friends let friends serve them, or else we can't be a part of each other. Now, Christians, sometimes we get so hopped up on the idea of, I need to be the servant, I need to do for you, I need to help you, I need to help my neighbor, I need to throw the party, I need to invite people, and we get so fixated on those things that somebody says, oh, Rob, can I help you with this? Oh, no, that's okay, I got it, we're good, I got it. Oh, Rob, I see that things are really busy, and you might need some, can I do this or that for you? No, it's all right, we're good. And so I might feel honorable in that moment. Like, I don't want to bother you, but what do we hear when we're the one that's offering service? Oh, you don't need me? Oh, you don't need my help? And so in my attempts to be honorable, I often am rejecting people. Even if I don't need it, sometimes I need what our friendship needs is I need to let you serve me. And that is a lesson that we all need to learn. There are times to serve, and there are times that we need to let other people serve us. We need to be humble enough and open enough and kind enough to say, yeah, you want to do that? Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be very helpful. Thank you so much. And not try to keep a persona of, I've got it all together, I can do it all myself. I used to be so much like that when Cassie would go away and I'd have 4 kids to take care of all by myself, and I would just want to prove to the world I don't need a single ounce of help. I can do it. I'm the Renaissance man. I can handle it all. And I would bend over backwards to make everything happen and everything work and show up to church and everybody's looks nice. They're like, yeah. Yep, Cassie's been gone for 4 days. We're good. I don't know if I'm just tired or if I've matured or whatever. Now I'm like, can somebody help me? Can somebody please? But it's an important thing. So Jesus knew who he was. He took the initiative. He served his friends, but also to remember that friends let friends serve them. If we want to start a movement of friendship, then I think this is a great way to start, is how do we talk to one another? When we talk to each other, how many good conversations have you had this week? Are you having good conversations? And that's where it starts. Because taking initiative is, there's the person that sits a couple cubicles over. Taking initiative is, there's the guy that you play basketball with every other week. Taking initiative is, there's the person that works at the grocery store that you see all the time. Taking initiative is, this week, don't walk by them. This week, stop and have a good conversation. And maybe that good conversation will lead to something else. But at least let's use these building blocks of relationship. And so we want to encourage, if you saw the display that's out in the hallway, mark those things. If you had a good conversation, a God conversation, a gospel conversation, keep throwing those ping pong balls in there for every single conversation you have that meets one of those things. Because our goal is in the next 4 weeks to fill that bin up. Our goal is not that we would trickle off, but that we'd get stronger. That this week we'll have more conversations than last week. And next week we'll double it. So I want to join you. I want to ask you to join me in that movement. Not just to fill a bunch of ping pong balls into a bin, but because this is who we are. This is what God's calling us to. We're a friendly bunch. But can we be more than friendly? Can we be friends?